Hey Elements class, I wanted to bring you a video tutorial on creating depth and dimension with colors. And we've gone over this in our tutorials, but I really wanted to just kind of break it down and show a close-up, just recorded segment of creating this effect. And I think it will be helpful to you as you do your projects and things. So what I've got here is I have my black base. And I've got some texture laid down into it, as we always create, black base or darker base with our texture. And then we come in with our brighter colors, right? So I don't want to completely cover the black, but I mostly want to cover the black. I don't want to have it look black with a little color added, right? So if you look closely, look at this pink. So I've got Rock Steady laid down first. And if you look close, you can see almost like a modeling effect, and you can see some of that black kind of peeking through, right? I've got deep turquoise that I'm going in with now, and most of it I'm covering up the black, but still leaving some little spaces and areas where there's really light coverage where that black is kind of peeking through. Now, always keep in mind that this effect is going to be intensified with a top coat applied. So even if you can't see a ton of black or it looks like it's just really light, when you add your top coat wax, water-based top coat or sealant, that is going to pop and be much darker and more intense. So always keep that in mind when you're doing that. And a way to test that out is you can get like a little, when it's totally dry, you can kind of get a damp cloth and just kind of lightly dab it. And that will give you an idea of what it would look like when it's sealed. All right. So I've got this deep turquoise, and I'm just kind of lightly stippling and blending this in. My Rock Steady wasn't completely dry. It's winter. I'm sitting next to a window. Takes a little bit longer. And so I just went in with the deep turquoise before my Rock Steady was completely dry, but I kind of liked it because it allowed me to blend a little bit and give a really, really soft fade into that more intense deep turquoise down at the bottom where my brush is now. So you can kind of see that progression. I really like that. So kind of play around with that. Mostly when I teach you to allow it to dry and then add your other layers over top. And typically you're going to get a better finish if you do that. You're going to get more of that three-dimensional finish instead of a blending finish, which is what you want. You want them layered, not blended. But a little bit of blending here and there is really nice. So kind of play around with that and see what you prefer. If it's getting too muddy, then let it dry a little longer. Okay, so now I'm coming in with Mandarina. And I just grabbed a few random colors just to kind of teach this concept. You can use any colors you'd like, or you can use the traditional colors that I've taught in the Raku lives. But again, I'm just stippling and lightly blending. And if you'll look at these colors. So there is a little bit of blending, like I've said, but a lot of it is dry brush, and it creates that depth and dimension that you want. So if you look at the section over on the left, you've got your deep turquoise, you've got Mandarina, but you can still see the black kind of peeking through under the modeling. So you can see all three colors coming through at once, and then we fade into our other colors on the right. Okay, so don't think of it as, I need this black base with a little color on top. I want a black base with quite a bit of color on top with some black peeking through. And then we're going to come back and add it in again at the end. And this is what really makes it pop, and it will darken up your piece or bring that black carbon, the chocolate, the smokiness back into the piece. Okay. I didn't add any white into this or a lighter color behind, but you can totally do that too. I wanted just a little more pop, and so I'm bringing a little bit more Rock Steady in and just laying it down a little more heavily. So you can see how I've got to go back and add more, and sometimes the process takes several times of layering something to get it right and get it how you want it to look. So I don't want you to ever think of the process as, here's step 1, step 2, step 3. Well, I did that and I don't like the way it looks. Okay, well, maybe hop back to step 2 and, bring in some more of that pink. So I want it a little more warm, or I want it a little more cool. Well, if I want it warm, I'm going to add an orange or a red. If I want it cool, I'm going to add like a blue or a green, and then just kind of keep lightly layering those colors. So there is a few areas where it's a little more heavy and you can't see any color behind it, but there's lots of areas that are very, very lightly colored or covered. You can see multiple colors through it. Okay, this is native clay that I'm using right now. It looks a little bit more orange. That's one, because it's not dry, and also because I still have a little bit of mandarina on my brush. I just used the same brush because it was mostly dry. If I wanted exact native clay, I would never do that. I would use a new brush. But I just wanted to kind of see what that did for me and go from there. I actually really like it. I think it's great. A really great color. Okay, so this is a little more true to native clay. You can see we've got a little bit more of that darker, rich color going down. And I'm adding this because now is where you kind of add your rust, right? Or that warm, that chocolate smoke that comes up. But I still have my turquoise showing through underneath. See how I'm showing that? Okay, so I still have those pops. So you can see every single color through it, and you can still have your black base. See, we've got our black touches here. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. I think I have enough color on here. And now we're going to add in our dark back. Okay, so I'm going to start with carbon. We're going to add a little iron oxide, and then we're going to go over it in the end with black. So this is carbon. I offload my brush first, so I dip it into the paint. You can see over here on the left, I've just swiped it onto the board, or there on the right. I'm offloading right now. I'm just making sure that I don't have a ton of paint on my brush so that when I lay it down onto the colors, I'm not leaving solid carbon marks. It's just very, very dry. And the intention is to give some smokiness, to give some depth, but it's really to grab those peaks that you've created with your texture and turn them carbon. So you're kind of taking it back to its original base, which was a dark black or a carbon, your top texture, okay? So it's a way to create a three-dimensional look by having a blacker carbon on the top, that color in the middle, and then your black base on the bottom, and being able to see all of the colors, not just there's black and there's my colors kind of peeking through. I feel like it makes it look more natural, more of like when your eye looks at a rock, it's not just, oh, that's a gray rock. It has so much to it, so much more to it. And that's because there's so many layers. Like rocks evolve over time and they form in layers, right? And you can see that a lot of rocks are, you can completely see all of it. And some rocks are just, looks more solid. Okay. But that's what we're doing. We're mimicking nature and creating these layers just like a rock would form. I'm going to continue dry brushing with the carbon and kind of just really get those peaks to take up some carbon. Now, also when I'm doing this, when I have a really dry brush and I'm doing this, I'm depositing a little tiny bit of that paint into the valleys as well, right? So if you only want it on the peaks, I recommend a palette knife. But for this step, I say use a Klingon brush or a good brush that you can really be hard on and dry brush with, and just take your time and add your slow dry brush layers. That way you're hitting the peaks and you're creating that dimension. But like I said, it's also getting a tiny bit into those valleys, and it's just kind of marrying the colors together so it doesn't look so harsh, right? Because you want to see all of those colors, but you don't want them to be muddled and you don't want them to be separate. So dry brushing is like the trick to marry all that together. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I want to, I'm using a flat object to create dimension. Now, if you have an object that's curved, a foot, a corbel, something sticking out of your piece, I'm going to kind of do the same thing to the entire piece, all right? So I have all that layer. Now, around the edges, I'm going to add a little bit of that carbon or black, just a little bit around the edges. Now, I've added quite a bit around the edges here, but if I was working on a smaller piece, I'd add a little tiny bit, right? It's heavier around the edges, and then I take my brush that's very, very dry, and I'm just stippling, and I'm slowly blending out the edge into the middle part of the piece. So this is going to give me some dimension because I'll have, that brighter colors that gives you like a curve look, and then your darker colors that kind of pull it back in. All right, so on your piece, you're going to mimic the same thing. And just take your time, just slowly dry brush and blend in that edge, wherever that may be, into your piece so you have a really nice smooth transition. And just take your time. Remember, it's really important. Oh, I dropped my phone. I dropped my phone so many times during this tutorial. I tried to set it up on this real fancy basket. And then when I got real aggressive dry brushing, I kept knocking it off. So if it falls over again, I'm sorry. I tried to edit them all out. Anyway, we are going to take some time to do this. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind also, if you feel lost in it, if you feel like, I don't know what to do, I don't know how, like this isn't looking right or something, then just stop. Seriously. There's nothing worse. And I can speak from experience. I've learned this lesson so many times over and over until I finally got it. But stop, walk away. Seriously, it will be there waiting for you later. Okay, go and eat something. Go take a walk. Even if you only have time for a 5-minute walk around the block, go and walk around the block. Just get out. And I promise you, eating's going to make you feel better. Taking a break's going to make you feel better. Go to the bathroom, for heaven's sakes. And taking a walk is going to inspire you because you're going to be in nature. And there's nothing more inspiring than that. So take a break and come back. Okay? When you're ready, here we go. And we drop the phone again. This is getting exciting, I think. I am adding in iron oxide here. I just want to give out that, that kind of rusted look. And so I'm adding quite a bit in this corner, and I'm just going to lightly add it in other places, just kind of give an overall warmth and not have it feel so dark and blackened. It's really an artistic choice of how you want your piece to look. If you want it to look very rusted and have a lot of that, then add more. And if you just want a little hint here and there, add a little. But I really do recommend adding at least a little bit, even if it's just a little bit of a drip here and there, because iron oxide really helps to tie it all together. And it's a color that is naturally found in so many things, from rust to clays, woods. I mean, you see it all over, even in clothing. It's a great color, and it ties a lot together. So I recommend adding at least a little bit. Okay, now look, you can still see all of the colors. You can still see our black, and we have some modeling. Add a little bit more rust in the corner here, and I'm going to leave this one a little bit more harsh and kind of let those lines come down from the edge of my brush. It almost looks kind of like a dripping, or like a kind of like when ash kind of falls down, gives that look, but this is like a rust. Anyway, and then I'm just going to blend in that iron oxide really lightly around the edges, but not over top of everything because I want to leave my carbon there, right? Now we are going in with black, okay? So I'm putting a little bit of black on the edge first. I'm going to offload my brush. We want a really dry brush because this is almost like a final dry brush. And you see what happened right there? See how I laid it down a little bit heavier? I mean, that's fine. It's not so heavy you can't see through it, but it is a little bit more heavy. So I want to make sure I work that out with my brush, okay? Everything else is pretty light, but look at that texture. Look at the design from the texture that's really starting to pop. Do you see that? So that texture has the black. I still have all my color underneath, and then I have my black base. So if you are working on a small section, a foot, a very detailed carved area, a door, a corbel, anything like that, this is what's going to work because you're going to lay down that dark. You're going to add all the color over top of it, pretty much covering it up. And then when you bring in that dry brush, you're really going to hit those raised areas, and then it's really going to give you that dimension, and you're going to have all of those pretty colors in the crevices of whatever you're working on. All right. And if you want it a little bit darker, let's say you want it a little more, let's say you're using chocolate instead of black, or you're using carbon, or you're using black, and you want it a little more heavy, then just go over it a few more times, or don't completely offload your brush. Leave it a little tiny bit heavier with the paint, like this, and then lightly go over. Now, the other thing I'll mention is, do you notice how I always start at the edge when I'm dry brushing and then I come down into the center of the piece? I never ever dry brush starting in the center of a piece because there's no guarantee how much paint is really on my brush, and I don't want to leave a big splotch right in the middle. So I always start in the edge. That way, if I leave a big splotch, it's not a big deal. I can blend it out and it's fine. If you're working on a really small piece and you're nervous about how much you're going to lay down, it just makes you nervous, then dry brush on something else first and get it to the consistency you want, and then go ahead and switch over. But be patient. It takes time to really get that dimension. And it's not just a two-step process. So I'll go over it with this and let it completely dry, because it does look a little different dry. But look at that texture. See all that? How it really pops? And you can see all the way to the base, but you can still see the colors. It's so cool how that works. It's fun for the eyes. Okay, I'm going to add in some copper. This is the copper paste from Prima. If you got a kit, it was in the kit, or you can just order it separate. But I think it's my most favorite copper. I love the color and I love the paste. It's freaking cool. It's what I used on my front door too, and it is amazing. It holds up really well. It doesn't need a top coat, which is cool. Anyway, I'm using a palette knife because I only want this copper to just hit the peaks. I don't want the whole thing to be copper, okay? So I started on my little design down there first, and then I'm just really lightly hitting the peaks. So by using a palette knife, I'm not going to deposit any copper or any of that, whatever color I'm using down into the valleys. It's only going to go on the peaks. And this is what gives you that extra 3D push, that extra pop. So if you want to add a metallic, do that. If you don't want to add a metallic, you can even go back over with your palette knife and a black, and then go over it again and make sure you really hit those peaks, and it will just really give you a little bit more dimension and pop, and it will darken it too if that's what you're going for. You could reverse the colors totally and start with a white base and come back to a white top. You could do anything you wanted, any color combination you want. I hope you guys do it. I hope you create really awesome things. But this is how you do it. It takes a little patience. It takes a little bit of time, but the results are so worth it and so much more layered and earthy and natural looking, just like it would be here. And even if you look out, look up in space, it's the same. You've got layers. You've got, all these colors and stars. And if you don't know much about space, start looking up some pictures, because this is kind of similar. So anyway, I hope this was helpful to you. And I wanted to show you one last thing that I did on this piece. So I wanted to add a little bit of drips to it, partly because I wanted just a little bit of a lighter tone to sit on top of it. This is a very dark finish, and it will even be a little bit darker when I add the top coat. You'll still see all the colors, but I wanted just a little bit of pop of a color that was very light, but not white. So I am using, it's the blue patina paste from Prima. You can use any color or glaze. You can use verdigris glaze. You can use Mermaid Kiss, deep turquoise. You could use a lighter color. You could even use a mandarina and orange would be cool. So I'm just painting a little bit down, and then I am using my water to spray it and letting it drip. If you didn't want to drip, or you had a surface that wasn't vertical, you could get it wet, kind of manipulate it with your fingers, add some more water, and then you can use a hairdryer or heat gun to kind of manipulate where you want that to flow. And I promise that is the last phone drop that we are going to experience during this tutorial. I would have edited them out, but then I'd have to re-record the entire voice part, and that's a lot of work. I know, it's lazy, but it's kind of exciting, so we're going to go with it. I'm going to let you watch the drip for a minute, and then I come back in with some water because I didn't want that straight, harsh line. So this has really, you can see the texture too. Isn't that cool? Okay, so you can see the texture and the little brush strokes going across, and I like that heavy brush stroke texture. So I played on it. And then by adding in my patina, I just added it in like halfway down, and then let that water drip to soften up that line and give it a nice soft feel. I love how you can see the patina just in the valleys of the texture, and then it's really light on the peaks. And the more that you water something down, the more that will show. Also, keep in mind it's going to look a lot lighter once it's totally dry. So dry it before you add more to decide if you need more. I hope this short tutorial was helpful to you and showed you some close-ups and gave you some info that will be beneficial in you creating your 3D finish.